In this era of grave spiritual crisis, it is not enough to simply know about your Catholic faith. That is why we need a Catholic Toolbox to equip us with the practical skills necessary to live our Catholic faith to reach our ultimate goal, which is heaven for all eternity. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for the Catholic Toolbox as we hand you the tools to go forth, live the faith, and change our modern world today. Live on the Voice of Charity. And welcome back to another week on the Catholic Toolbox, the art of practical Catholicism. I'm your host and founder, George Manassa, here as we equip you with practical tools to live your faith in our modern world of today. And this week in studio, I have Father John Flader. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, George. Good to be here again.
Yes, it's always great to have you. You look very energetic. You look stronger.
Oh, I am energetic. Why shouldn't I be?
Yeah, you got a lot younger.
Oh, I'm very young. I knocked 30 years off my age when I turned 80, so I'm 50s. Yeah.
I don't dare play tennis with you or
well, you could.
Or golf. I hear you're very good at golf.
No, I'm very bad at golf. I'm pretty good at tennis.
Oh, you're good at tennis?
Yeah, okay. for my age.
Yes. And what are we talking about today?
Well, that's your choice, but we're talking about my latest book, From Time to Eternity.
From Time to Eternity, Sequel to Dying to Live and the Final Exam. How do you find the time to write books, Father? You live a very busy life, you have a busy schedule, and you do a lot of work during the week.
Yes.
How do you find the time to keep writing books?
Well, it's explained in one of the other books in the introduction that when you want to do something badly, you'll always find the time. I don't have much time, as you say, but you just use every minute, every hour. And I was assisted, actually, in writing each one of these three books by a circumstance that just gave me a little bit more time. With the first one, Dying to Live, it was COVID. So I'm a chaplain at a girls' school, Tangara School for Girls, and the girls couldn't go to class for, I can't remember, a couple of months. So that was my opportunity. I could write the book that I already started, Dying to Live, showing that there is life after death, and then showing the Christian view of it at the end. And then the second book came the following year, and this is the Final Exam. And then it was, I think it was a hip problem. I couldn't play tennis or something, so I had a little bit of extra time there. And that book, I think I wrote in 4 months.
In 4 months?
I gave myself 6 months. I started on the 1st of July in that year, which would have been 2022.
Yep.
And I said, this book is finished by the 31st of December. It was finished by the end of October. I was giving a treat to Carmelite nuns in Launceston, and I knew when I went there, this book can be finished while I'm on the retreat, although there was quite a bit of time occupied in preaching and hearing confessions and so on. But I did finish. I finished the first draft. Then you have to do some editing after that. And then the third book, From Time to Eternity, came when I had heart surgery in March of this year. And I just had the idea for the book in January.
Yeah.
And let me just say something about how these books came to be at all, because it's just the providence of God. The first, I would never have written any one of these three. I would never have decided to do that. But a friend, this we probably discussed on the program here before, but anyway, just to remind your listeners and viewers, a friend on a retreat in Kenter Study Center, where I was giving the retreat in January of whatever year that was, 2021, I guess, said, wouldn't it be good if there were a book on life after death for people who don't believe in it? I immediately took the idea and I said, I can do this. I had written quite a bit on that subject for the Catholic Weekly over the years, And I
You were
thought,
also a columnist for the Catholic Weekly.
yes, I've been a column for the Catholic Weekly since 2005. I'm
That's
in
great.
my 20th year, and we've
And
just
it's
published.
called Question Time.
Well, it was called Question Time when I started. So every 150 questions, every 3 years, we brought out a volume of Question Time, and the most recent one, Question Time 6,
Yeah.
just came out a few months ago. So writing every week gave me a lot of topics that I had covered on life after death. So I thought this is a good topic. Plus, I was not aware of any book on life after death for people who didn't believe in it. There's a lot of books on the last things written by and for Catholics. But a book for people who don't believe in life after death, I wasn't aware that one existed. So we wrote that book, or I wrote the book, and then with all three of them, if one picks up the book, and you can pick up this one, and you see there's no mention of the fact that I'm a priest. We didn't want to scare away the atheists.
Yes, when you look at, I think, your sequel, from starting from Dying to Live, The Final Exam, and now this book, From Time to Eternity, you see John Flader on it.
Yeah.
I just thought, you wrote this when you were a layman.
Sure. And then on the back there's a
John
description.
Flader, where's the priest?
There's the description at the bottom. So that's who this person is, but there's no mention that he's a
John
priest.
Flader has a Bachelor of Arts in Chemistry from Harvard and a doctorate in canon law from the University of Navarre, Spain. Since 1968, he has been in Australia working with students at the University of New South Wales, the University of Tasmania, RMIT University, and various schools in Sydney. I just think of the Doctor of Canon Law. Maybe that hints.
Yeah, anybody that knows what canon law is, they might think it's spelled with two N's and it's got something to do with canon. So anyway, I put that in, like that's part of my degree. So I thought, well, we better put that in. But I think the average pagan atheist doesn't know what canon law is anyway. So I've got a doctorate. He's probably impressed why I've got a doctorate. So anyway, that was that book. So that book came out.
Great idea, Father.
And it was published the following year. Then how did the second book come about? Well, a friend in Brisbane read the first book, and people really liked this book, the first one. It was selling very well. Mm-hmm. And so a friend in Brisbane liked it very much, and he said, please write another book in this same style. The style is conversational. It is not formal. There might be a sentence with one word in it, or three, not, for example, without a verb. This typical writing today as you would converse with people. So I thought, let's make it a really informal, conversational style.
For today's short attention span society.
Well, I wasn't thinking of that, but I think people...
But it will cater to that.
Short chapters, too.
Yeah. Short
So
chapters.
anyway, so then he said, please write another book in the same style. I thanked him for the email. I had no intention whatsoever of writing another book. I don't have time to write books. So then I was praying about it one day in the chapel, and this idea just hit me. It was the providence of God hitting me. And it was that we could write another book developing the final chapter of the first one, which was entitled, What Must I Do? So the reader now believes in life after death is wondering, what do I have to do to get to heaven? And there's a few suggestions on living a good moral life, avoiding certain sins, and I mentioned a few. But I thought we could write another book that develops that based on the Ten Commandments, but again, for non-believers. And so you could not base your treatment of morals on the Bible or the magisterium of the church. It had to be all on the natural law. And it was a bit of a challenge, but I dealt with all the sensitive topics like contraception, euthanasia, abortion, and so on, showing how they're just natural law, or I often use the word common sense. So that book sold very well as well. So now we had two books, and that was the one that I wrote in 4 months when I was finishing it, preaching to the Carmelites. Then, okay, that's the end of books on life after death. Until this January, I was just relaxing on a course in Kenthurst, and then I read one sentence of St. Josemaria. And
who is St. Josemaria?
St. Josemaria, founder of Opus Dei, which he was a Spanish priest, founded, well, God showed him Opus Dei. So he said, I wasn't the founder, God was. So in 1928, when when he was 26 years of age, God showed him what God wanted from him, a way of holiness in the middle of the world. And it would be a vocation, that is to say, a commitment, not just a movement where you could join and leave, but a commitment to pursue holiness in your ordinary circumstances of life. So housewives and truck drivers and airplane pilots and coal miners. I often show the difference between the airplane pilot 35,000 feet above sea level and the coal miner perhaps miles below
the ground level.
Yeah, all of these people in Opus Dei. So he's the founder. I lived close to him in Rome.
So you lived with a saint?
I lived with a saint, and I had
Wow.
hundreds of get-togethers with other people and 2 on my own for about 20 minutes. So, no, I was greatly influenced. What I am as a priest, I owe 99% to St. Josemaria. So anyway, I was reading a sentence of his, and then it just triggered an idea. Now, if I went back to find the sentence, I might ask myself, how did that ever give rise to an idea to write another book? I suspect that would be the case. Anyway, so the third book has another topic, which is how to live on a daily basis, keeping your eye on the goal, which is heaven, and not getting sidetracked, distracted by the pursuit of money or discouragement when things aren't going well. And so there's a number of chapters that relate to just your ordinary life and things that can happen, good things and bad. For example, if we're going to meet God forever in heaven, then let's get to know him. So again, this is a book for non-believers. You are going to meet God, get to know him. So there's a chapter on God and who he is. Then get to know him. There's a chapter on prayer, different forms of prayer. And there's a chapter on undue attachment to the world, to material things, to your plans, which is entitled Heart in God, Not in Goods. And the average person, well, believes in heaven, but there's a little bit of heart in the world and their daily issues and their material possessions and their envy of someone else who has more than they do or travels overseas more than they do. So that is the idea of this book. And then the final chapter I really like, and the book came out during the Olympics, and now the Paralympics are on. But the final chapter owes its origin to meditations that I was giving to young people, university students generally, or high school, during Olympic years. And the idea of the meditation and of this chapter, which is far more developed than my meditations, is athletes who want to succeed, and we're talking about at every level, from going to the Olympics and winning a gold medal to somebody who just has taken up a sport, tennis, golf, squash, badminton, and just wants to improve in it. They've got a goal. So what the meditation was about and what the chapter is about is let's look at sports people. How do they live their life to achieve their goal? And they're doing it, as St. Paul writes to the Corinthians in the 1 Corinthians chapter 9, that there's a race is for all, but the prize is for one. And they do it, he says, to win a crown that fades, or in the Bible that I use, to win a laurel wreath. That's the crown that fades. And they'll do that in the old days. In the Olympics, they had Olympics, of course, in Greece, and St. Paul was aware of that, writing to the Corinthians. And so they're going to really sacrifice. They live self-control, he says, to win a crown that fades. And then he said, but our crown is imperishable. Our crown is heaven. If they are going to go to great lengths to win a crown that fades, today a gold medal, it's not going to fade very quickly, but then it was a laurel wreath. What should we not do for eternity? And then there's a whole series of aspects of the sports people that we can imitate. And I'm going to go to the table of contents of this book. And for the final chapter, there's a few subheadings throughout the book. And in this one, Sporting Spirit, it's entitled, Having a Goal. Everybody has a goal. even the amateur wanting to improve in the sport, the goal is to improve until I can enjoy it more. Or perhaps they're playing competition so I can win a little bit. So they've got a goal, striving for the goal. Not only having a goal, they're determined to reach the goal. And that leads to the following things: sacrifice and self-control. So the athlete often will deny himself or herself in food, so they lose weight, maybe eat foods that will put on muscle or energy or whatever.
Paleo diet, carnivore diet.
You name the diet, and they're living it today. And
intermittent
athletes,
fasting.
yeah. Actually, listen to this.
Which is great.
I was running on the athletics team at Harvard my first year there. I wasn't any good, but I was running on the athletics team. So we had a special diet, even in first year university, and it was a lot of beef, a lot of steak. So you went into the dining room with everybody else, but they gave you some special foods. See, that's at the lowest level of...
They put you on the paleo diet.
Well, it was a lot of beef.
What else?
Maybe it was carnivore.
What else did you... Yeah, so you were just eating meat?
No. I was eating everything, but just more meat than other people. More
So
beef.
it was a whole foods diet?
Yeah.
Maybe it was
food,
paleo.
yeah. Well, it wasn't so much diet, it's just giving us extra...
It's real food.
Yeah,
this
it's
is the
real
food we should
food.
be eating.
That's what we were doing. So then self-sacrifice, self-control. They'll give up alcohol. They'll give up smoking. They'll give up staying out late at night, especially when they get closer to their event. Then the training program. And for us, self-sacrifice and self-control is penance and just moderation and everything, the virtue of temperance. So then they've got a training program. And just the other day, I was talking with a friend whose daughter in year 6 is a champion for her age in Australia in gymnastics. And this girl is looking forward to the Olympics and possibly Brisbane or maybe even LA. She's only 11 now, but she's really good. And this, her dad said, we get up early in the morning to take her to training, and I can't remember whether it was 2 hours before she goes to school. And she's only in year 6. So 2 hours, and then there might be training after school as well. Swimmers do the same. My niece was a swimmer in the U.S., and she was training in a pool where there were Olympians training. She never made it to the Olympics, but she competed in competitions of a regional basis within the U.S. And every morning, her father and her mother took turns getting up at 4:30 to get her to the pool. And this is what athletes do. And imagine at the professional level or at the Olympic level, they are really pushing themselves with a training program. Well, we have a training program, and it's just a regular series of spiritual exercises that we're going to do every day. We get up in the morning on time. We do a morning offering, let us say. Then we might do some mental prayer at a fixed time. We might go to Mass every day if we can at a fixed time, or maybe alternating depending on our work schedule or whatever we're doing. And then we'll probably say the Angelus, and then we'll have the Rosary, and then we might do some reading of Scripture or spiritual reading. And then we'll go to bed and we'll do an examination of conscience. So we have a training program too. And unless it's fixed in our mind and more or less at the same time every day, we're going to start missing things. But the athlete doesn't do that. They have a regular time for everything in their training. And if they're going to do that for their own enjoyment of the sport or to win some competition, what are we not going to do for eternity? So let's have a plan. Let's follow it with rigor and with flexibility, of course. But that is the way we're going to grow in holiness. And our goal is holiness here and union with God hereafter. Then they've got a coach.
That's the goal of the Catholic faith.
Yeah,
that's the
all
reason
of this,
we're Catholic, to get to heaven, to save our soul.
That's the reason we're human.
Yeah, it's not social justice.
Yeah. No.
It seems like a lot has been clouded with social justice warriors. And I love social justice. It's a great thing to do.
Absolutely.
But I don't know, you look at the church today sometimes, maybe on an ecclesiastical, maybe or just on a mere impression, and there seems to be too much. You never hear clearly about the call to salvation. You know, we need to save our soul, we need to become saints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which goes together with, we've got to get people to Mass and back to Mass when, according to the last Church Life Survey of 2021, 8.2% only of Catholics across this country were going to Mass regularly on Sundays. 8.2%.
8.2%.
Yeah, I always think of the shepherd in the parable. The good shepherd in the parable he had 99 sheep in his sheepfold and one was lost. Today's shepherd in Australia has 8 sheep in his sheepfold and 92 are wandering. And we've got to go out and find them and help to bring them back. And so this is what the church is all about. It's not about, yes, about social justice, of course, and care for the poor, of course, but above all, lead people to heaven. If we're not leading people to heaven, starting with ourselves, then we have failed miserably. If we don't get to heaven, and that's one of the points in this book and the other 2 books as well, that if we don't get to heaven and we spend eternity in hell, then we have absolutely failed miserably, and we can't afford that. So this book is about how to live your life. Let's just continue to the end of this one. We can go on to something else. But they've got a coach. Well, that's the spiritual director, and it can be often the priest in confession. The spiritual director can be a friend who is just a little bit farther along on the way to holiness. They've been practicing this longer than we have. They can give us some good advice. It might be a married person. So for a married person seeking advice on how to grow in holiness in the married state and with children, go to another married person who is maybe committed to doing this, as one might be in Opus Dei, or simply living a very good life, and they can guide us. So a coach, very, very helpful. Then coping with failures. And athletes fail with it, whether it be an injury that they now can't compete. They were hoping to get, like the U.S. Open tennis started this morning, our time in Sydney. And I noticed a few Australians have already won, and a few have lost, but that's all right. Listen to this, George. If you qualify, there's a qualifying tournament, and it starts with probably 64 players from around the world who are good enough to get into the qualifying tournament. If they lose in the qualifying tournament in the first round, they walk away with 10,000 American dollars. If they qualify and they're the top 16 who will go into the main draw in the U.S. Open, then just qualifying, they will get $100,000. George, that's more than you and I make in a long time. Certainly me.
It's good value. It's worth competing.
So anyway, and if you lose in the first round, of course, you've got your 100,000.
I'm sure your book sales are through the roof. So that's.
Well, I'm not a millionaire through book sale. I can assure you. I get the satisfaction of helping people. Actually, let me read something of Michael Jordan. Are you happy with that?
Yes, of course.
Michael Jordan. This is I heard
but
this.
You're
once.
not much of a basketball player, are you?
I was in high school. I like to play basketball.
All you Americans. Do all you Americans play basketball?
No, but a lot of them do in the Midwest. It gets cold in the winter, and you play.
But you're from Wisconsin, Kohler, Wisconsin.
Kohler, Wisconsin, which is.
What was that like?
Growing up in a little village in Wisconsin.
In a little village, yeah.
It's growing up in a little village. Actually, listen to this. When you look at the world today, the state it is in, and you look at the world in which I grew up, let's say I was born in the 1940s, but actually it's a little bit closer to one of those. And growing up then, or being a parent then, was super easy because everybody went to church, Protestants, Catholics. Marriages stayed together. Television, when it came in about the mid-40s, was 100% wholesome for children. Every single program was black and white, of course, at the beginning. And drugs, recreational drugs, didn't exist. The internet, with all of its good things, and I use it all the time writing my articles and books as well, but all of its filth didn't exist. And it's the filth that people have found and get really hooked on, and it's absolutely destructive of any sort of moral life. And good people, they're struggling with it, and they're going to confession. However, that the internet has led to widespread problems with pornography, let us say that. So the world today is a vastly different one. Television today, be very careful what you watch. Then it was wholesome. Marriages are breaking up in far greater numbers. People are not going to Mass, like 8.2% going to Mass. When I was back in the States, now this is a long time ago when my mother was still alive, and I asked her, Mom, what percentage of Catholics do you think, now this is a tiny village where...
In Wisconsin.
Yeah, but there would have been hundreds of people in the parish.
Yeah.
And what percentage of the people do you think go to Mass every Sunday? And she says, well, I think they all do. And they did. Listen to this statistic. In that little village, there were 1,500 people when I was growing up. Now it's huge. It's 2,000, which is enormous. And then if you get the percentage of Catholics, I calculated there would be about 600 Catholics in the village and in the surrounding farms. It was a dairy farm area. So 600 people in your Sunday Masses. There are probably 3 Masses on Sunday. Then how many people were actually attending Mass every Sunday? The answer was 900, because it was a good priest, it was a beautiful church, and they had a beautiful choir singing polyphony.
And you had a great liturgy.
Well, they had a great liturgy. So
which expressed the theology of the church much more clearly.
Yeah, and a beautiful
in the
church,
traditional Latin Mass.
A good priest celebrating Mass well. People were coming from all over to that parish. And so you had 150% of all your Catholics attending Mass every Sunday, and they weren't going twice. These were people coming in from elsewhere. So that was the world in which I grew up, and that went 50 years after I was there growing up.
Wow.
So life then was good, wholesome. Today the wheels are falling off. And all the more reason why all Catholics and other people are called to be saints. We've got to be saints for 2 reasons. I mean, 2 main reasons. One is because God has loved us. We want to love him in return. Sainthood is loving God and doing his will, having this spiritual plan of life, a training program. We need to be saints to preserve our own faith in a world which is corrupt and which the winds are blowing, the rains are falling, the waters are rising, but our house is founded on rock because we're founded on a very solid spiritual foundation. The people who have drifted away since the last church life survey, which according to those numbers, from 11.8% to 8.2%, that's practically a quarter, I think it's more than a quarter of your practicing Catholic population in 2016 have fallen away. Good people, very good people. But life, whatever it is, COVID may have had an influence, I'm sure it did. So people are falling away. We need to stand firm. Reason number 1. Reason number 2, who is going to find the lost sheep? Priests can reach the parishioners. They can energize the parishioners to go out and bear fruit, find the lost sheep. Groups like the Legion of Mary are doing this all the time. We should all be doing it. That colleague of work, that neighbor, that friend, that member of our extended family, often our children. So we need to be saints so that our light is shining brightly and people are drawn to it. And one of the things we're saying this year, and this is global. Well, I can speak for Australia because in the Catholic Weekly, just after Easter, they reported significantly more people coming into the church in the Easter Vigil around Australia and especially Sydney. But
are you talking about the biannual Catholics?
No, I'm talking about, I'm talking about converts.
Oh, sorry, converts.
Yeah. People who have come through the RCA or other formation and they've come into the church. Yeah, sorry, it's ambiguous, isn't it?
because every year, and it's funny, because I make a comment either to my wife or some friends or people, this year the church will be packed. The biannual Catholics are here. They come twice a year.
Absolutely.
For Easter and for Christmas.
Yeah, C&E Catholics. Christmas and
C&E
Easter.
Catholics.
Yeah. So, and then
And I'll tell you something funny. You know, I used to make a joke. I used to say, well, they don't need to come to Mass, you know, every Sunday because they have their own private chapels at home. They get private Masses and they're living lives of sanctity as hermits. And that's just my optimism.
Yes,
We're the sinners that have to go to Mass every Sunday.
Yeah. No, that's right.
I wish that was true.
No, we've got to go out. Just one parish. In the parish of Our Lady of Dolors in Chatswood, which is a suburban parish
I've
in
been
Sydney.
hearing a lot about that over the weeks.
Well, they're using my Journey into Truth program, which is another one of the books of DVDs, and they get it, they're downloading, and of course the
Which
DVDs.
appeared on EWTN.
It did, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a series on EWTN. I think it's constantly used on EWTN.
Well, I don't know about constantly, but they certainly use the creed. So it's the 4 parts of the Catechism. It's a commentary on the Catechism. Instructions in the Catholic faith for people coming into the church. And it's being used for adult education as well. And in that parish, they're now using it. And they've had between 40 and 50 people attending every week. And they'll be running it for the 24 weeks of the 24 sessions. I've been there twice. But the parish priest was telling me that in that parish alone, in the Easter Vigil, they received 49 people into the church.
49 people?
In one parish. Now, that's a very good parish.
That's unheard of.
That's unheard of.
That is unheard of.
Except the Korean parish. They get a lot of people.
Something happening in Korea, do you think?
Well, here, the Korean church in Silverwater, yeah. Plus, there's other places where lots of Koreans go.
But the faith is thriving in Korea.
Yeah,
there's many conversions in Korea and within the Korean community within Australia. They're giving the Maronites a run for their money.
Well,
with numbers and
just on the practice of faith of Maronites, because I have the highest regard for Maronites. I gave a retreat a couple of weeks ago. And you know some of the people that were on it.
Yes, I saw the list.
A group of Maronites was trying to get the whole retreat packed out with their friends, and it was almost all of them.
I heard about that for 3 months.
Before. But it was good. They really liked it. But anyway.
So a whole retreat got booked out by Maronites?
No, they tried to book it out, but there were other people that got in before they started to book it out.
So they couldn't take over the whole thing?
No, there were 29 people on it, and probably 24 or so were Maronite Catholics. But across the country, in at least the 2016 Church Life Survey, when 11.8% of all Catholics, including Maronites, were attending Mass on Sundays, 50% roughly of Maronites were attending Mass.
Okay.
And so they're much more.
So 50% of Maronite Catholics attend Mass from
every Sunday.
From what they found every single Sunday.
Yeah.
Which is phenomenal. 50% compared to, I mean, the overall Catholic is about 8 to 12%.
Yeah.
It's probably between 10%.
Well, it was 11.8 in 2016, when 50% roughly, might have been 49 or 51, but it was there. And then I mentioned that I was giving a talk to a group of Maronites in a prayer group, and when I walked in, I congratulated the Maronites because they have the highest regard for the Maronites and all levels and whatnot. They've got the faith. And then I said, congratulations, because when 11.8% of all Catholics are attending Mass, you Maronites are attending Mass in 50%. And there was a deacon, a married deacon, who was running it. He's now a priest. And when I said that 50%, he said, yes, and that's the problem. And I thought, congratulations. To see 50% attending as a problem is good. Why? Because where are the other 50%? I mean,
where are the other 50%?
Where are the other 50%? That's a problem. So anyway, we all have a call to holiness and a call to the apostolate. Let me just finish with this. I was going to read Michael Jordan.
Okay, let's go into Michael Jordan.
Let's go to Michael Jordan. It's a little section called Coping with Failures. Michael Jordan. He once commented, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed, which I understand to mean you cope with failures, but you don't give up. you start over. And how many athletes are there? Take the Paralympics. I'm just super impressed with all those Paralympians. And I remember reading perhaps the last Olympics in the Paralympics. It was an Australian who was fighting, and I think it was Afghanistan, and he had his leg blown off by a landmine.
Yeah.
And then he said, I was lying there and I was thinking, now what am I going to do? Already then, instead of, oh, poor me, he was thinking what he could do with one leg. And now he's a Paralympic and probably a champion. But these people are so impressive. They have coped with adversity and they haven't given up. They've sought some goal, and God bless them. They're an inspiration to everyone.
Wow.
So I mean so there's a lot in this chapter, coping with failures. Now let me just finish. I'll just see what else there is that athletes do that we can do. And they cope with failures. We're going to fail. We might fall into sin. It might be a failure in our health or in our job or whatever, but we don't give up. We start over again. Doctor or physiotherapist. So the doctor or the physiotherapist, when someone is injured, is what they have, and all the tennis players have a whole team of these. And we have the priest. So we failed, we've injured ourselves with sin. We go back to the priest, who is our doctor and physiotherapist, and through the sacrament we are healed and we start over, following the rules. In fact, there's quotes from St. Paul in 4 or 5 of these. He speaks about the spiritual life and the sporting life, and he speaks about following the rules. If you don't follow the rules, you get disqualified. And there are rules in the church which are called the 10 Commandments, and of course the precepts of the church as well. We've got to follow the rules too. Then timeouts. When I was talking about the book, someone suggested the idea of timeouts. And in some games, like basketball, all the various football codes, well, in some there's not a timeout, but there's always a halftime. And sometimes, like in AFL, there's a quarter-time break.
Yeah, exactly.
So what happens in the timeout? Or in basketball, you take a timeout. What do you do then? You rest a little bit, and you look back over what you've just done and say, we can do better. How can we improve? And the coach is there to advise you. So in the spiritual life, we need timeouts too. And that can be something on our own, which, for example, we do at night with examination of conscience. We just stop and look at the day and where did I go wrong and what went well, what can I do tomorrow to improve? Or we go on a monthly day of recollection, let us say. And there we stop again, we catch our breath, and we look at where we are and how we can improve. I've just finished giving 3 retreats, and I've got another one starting next Sunday for a whole week. And on a retreat, again, it's a longer time out. You stop, you take off a whole weekend or whatever, look at your life. How can I be that better person, that saint that God wants me to be?
Did our Lord go on a retreat?
He was often praying on his own. Yep. And he invited the apostles to do it in Mark chapter 6, and I think it's verse 30, where he says, he saw that they were tired. It says, come away to a lonely place and rest a while, for there were many coming and going, and they scarcely had leisure even to eat. They went away, but it wasn't a quiet place. There were 5,000 men and women and children, and he had to feed them. But that was a time out for him.
The retreat with our Lord seems to be where he went up on Mount Tabor.
Yeah.
With the apostles, and he was away. They retreated up to the mountain. So they were praying. They needed some time out. We could possibly see that as a retreat.
One could see it as that, yes. Whether that was his intention in going there, or whether he, as God knew, the transfiguration would take place, and he wanted the 3 chosen ones to see that. But just on Mount Tabor as a place to relax, know that, and I was there last year, in June and July, we went to Mount Tabor, and I always had a question in my mind, they said they led him up a high mountain apart. And what does Mount Tabor look like? Well, it looks like Ayers Rock, in a sense, in Australia. It is a mesa, an upside-down bowl, sticking out of the plain around it, the plain of Jezreel. and it is, well, it is high enough and steep enough that the tourist bus, the big one, goes up about a quarter of the way, stops at a big parking lot, and then you get into minibuses which make their way up the hairpin bends to the top. And they say, if you were going to walk up Mount Tabor, it would take you about 4.5 hours. Now you probably have to stop here and there because it's pretty high and it's fairly steep. So if you're going to rest there, I can think of other places along the Sea of Galilee or the River Jordan. You might have gone there to rest. You wouldn't have to climb first because you're going to spend the next week
The
just
Dead Sea,
recovering.
that'd be a great place to rest, with a book.
Well, the Dead
You
Sea.
float in the Dead Sea.
Oh, you could do that as well. You could read the newspaper. The Dead Sea, you couldn't do it.
Or grab a Mantush in Jordan, That'd
Yeah.
be the oregano pizza. That'd be nice.
Yes. So, and then the final part of this is finishing the race, and the runner who starts well, let's say in the marathon or in the 1500 or whatever, and doesn't finish, it's a failure. And then I mentioned these Olympic runners, and we've seen the film of it. Oh, I was a black runner that I can remember, and it's the marathon, and he's getting cramps at the end. And everybody else is in the stadium. He's very near the stadium. You can see the stadium in the picture. He gets a severe cramp in his leg, falls down, rubs his leg, gets up again, staggers forward, falls down again, but keeps on getting up, goes into the stadium long after the last runner. And if there were people there, they were applauding this fellow just for finishing. That's what we've got to do. We can fall down numerous times spiritually and humanly in our life, but we've got to finish the race. And then we can say with St. Paul, and this is the last paragraph and the well-known words, and Paul is in the last probably days, weeks of his life. He's in Rome in imprisonment for the second time. He knows his life is coming to an end. He says, I am already on the point of being sacrificed. The time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. From now on, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. That has to be all of us, and helping everybody else we know, including non-Catholics, non-Christians. Everybody has a place in heaven. Well, let's help them get there by letting our light shine, being the salt and the leaven. And just our example of a bright person who is happy, who cares about others, who is generous, for whom nothing is a problem. That's attractive, and that's where it all starts.
It's absolutely amazing. And how would you describe this book? Is this a practical guide to take action with your faith?
This is exactly what that is. This is your handbook, how to live in order to get to heaven. Actually, if we have some time, the cover is kind of curious. The person in the United States or anywhere else that's going to pick up
So
this
it's
book,
published by Connor Court.
published by Connor Court. And by the way, I should mention that we've got an audiobook coming out of the first book, Dying to Live. I recorded it myself, and it's still in the process of being analyzed by the people that do that for technical quality and moral quality, I guess, or just the content. They want to look at that. But this one has the harbor bridge kind of in the darkness, and then it says, from time to eternity. And the reason for this is that, well, it's explained in my introduction, and this book changed titles while I was writing it, from the journey of life, or the journey to heaven. I can't remember, actually, it's in the journey to heaven, from time to eternity. And after my operation with the heart, I had to go for walks. And I was walking past a Baptist church very near where I live, and I noticed on the curb a small metal plaque which read, Eternity, with this handwriting, where will you spend it? And I thought, that's it. That's the title, From Time to Eternity. And the origin of that plaque is a man named Arthur Stace, who was he had a problem with alcohol. He'd been in and out of jail even when he was 15. He was then, at some point in a Baptist church, the preacher was preaching about eternity. And it so struck that man, who was practically illiterate. He couldn't write his own name legibly. He was so struck that he took a piece of chalk out of his pocket then and there and wrote on the floor of the church, eternity, with beautiful handwriting that neither he nor anyone who knew him could understand how he could possibly write it in such beautiful handwriting. And look at this. This isn't his actual script, which was copyrighted. We had to take a font which is very close to it. And then, from then on, for 35 years until he died in 1967, every morning, it would seem, he would get up, he would take his yellow chalk, and he would write eternity on the footpaths of Sydney, probably in the CBD.
Yeah.
And people saw him doing that, and he finally died, and then it all stopped. But so iconic was what he was doing, reminding people about eternity. When we had the Olympics, well, both two things in the year 2000. For the fireworks on New Year's Eve, the city of Sydney put eternity in that script on the harbour bridge in big illuminated letters.
Yes.
And then
yes.
later that year for the Sydney Olympics in the year 2000, they used eternity as well. So it became symbolic with Sydney, and the world saw it. And I thought, well, that's the topic, that's the title of the book. And let's maybe use the Harbour Bridge with eternity on it as the cover. And then I gave it to the designer, and he thought maybe make eternity a bit bigger, and it's not. It was smaller than that on the Harbour Bridge. But anyway, that's how the book came to be, and we hope people will read it and get something out of it. And as you say, this is the handbook of practical Catholicism, and again, it's written for non-believers too, and anybody can pick up this book, and if they believe at all in eternal life, which I remind them in the first chapter of some of the things I've written in the previous, especially in Dying to Live. So if they hadn't read that book, this one stands alone. They're reminded of the importance of eternity and how everybody can get there. There's a little bit on the near-death experiences, which were a crucial chapter in the first book. So
I think that was very unique in the sense that you focused on people's near-death experiences who were undergoing surgery, for example, and a woman left her body, levitated over her body, saw the surgery happening,
and
the doctor forgot where the scissors were, and then she must have returned back to her body, and then when she woke up, she told the doctor where the scissors were.
Yeah.
When she was under surgery.
Yeah. Well, and
remarkable.
That particular one, the lady in life was blind. So blind in life, but when the soul leaves the body, she could see.
It's not bound by the physical laws of the universe, which include your physical disabilities.
And the other one, which is really interesting, is if you ask, how old will we be in heaven? Now, you say, well, this person died at 110. They were pretty wrinkled and decrepit. Are they going to be 110 in heaven? And how about the babies who are miscarried or maybe aborted, and let's suppose they are in heaven too? The church hasn't defined on that, but personally I believe that they're going to go to heaven too. But they're tiny. Then there's the 1-year-olds and the 7-year-olds. And St. Thomas Aquinas ventured that we will all be 33. So that's the perfect age at which Christ died. Okay, so that's his opinion. There's no dogma of faith regarding that. However, in that book, there are two accounts, and one of them is related by a good friend of mine, Mike Willisey. And he said, well, he had a friend, Ron Tesorero, who worked with him in investigating miracles, and especially Eucharistic miracles. And they both came back to the faith. When they started, neither of them was practicing the Catholic faith in which they grew up, but they both came back. And then Ron was married with some children, and his wife was named Gabriel. She died of a heart attack in her 60s. I think she was 64. And then sometime later, Mike relates how he was in St. Mary's Cathedral in Sydney, and he said, I saw Gabriel. And she looked heavenly, very, very beautiful, very peaceful, serene, smiling. And he said, I could see her from about the shoulders up. And she looked like she was in her 20s. So that was his description of Gabriel, who had died in her 60s. Then, a few months later, Ron, the husband of Gabriel, gets a phone call from a friend in Melbourne. And this friend knew the Tesorero family only in the holidays. They would holiday near where the Tesoreros lived on the central coast of New South Wales. And he only knew the Tesoreros for the last maybe few years. But he relates the same thing. He says, I was lying in bed, and then I saw Gabriel, and she looked very young. And I never knew her when she was young, but somehow I knew this was Gabriel. And he gave the same description. I saw her from about the shoulders up. She looked very peaceful, smiling, very heavenly, and about that age. So as regards the age that will be when we get to heaven, as I always say, we'll find out when we get there. But perhaps we will all be young, and well, of course we'll all be extremely happy, so we'll be smiling and peaceful and serene.
And let's end by giving us 3 quick practical tools. What can people take out of this book from time to eternity,
which
is
George,
the main point of the Catholic faith?
Yeah. This time I wasn't prepared. However, having this topic...
you have practical tools all up here in your head?
I'm preaching practical tools in all my retreats and meditations. So they're all...
Have I molded your approach to your retreats and meditations?
Not really, but it's been practical all along. So what practical points...
always has been practical.
Well,
yes.
The first one is to remember, so there's a human element, what the goal of life is. And, we go back to the Catechism for Children. Why did God make me? God made me to know, love, and serve Him on earth in order to be happy with Him forever in heaven. And heaven is for everybody. So the first practical point is don't lose sight of the goal. Keep that goal in mind. Keep it in mind every day if you can.
Laser focus on the goal.
Through your
Yes.
prayers. Then,
Number 2.
In order to get there, we have to be saints. Now, that doesn't mean perfect. It means a sinner who struggles. But we can't just coast into heaven with mediocrity. We have to really struggle. So for this, a spiritual plan of daily activities is exceedingly helpful. So each person, depending on where they are now, what they're doing now, take up some a plan of your prayer life. When are you going to pray? Find a time to do it so you can do it more or less at the same time every day. And if you can get to Mass, if you're a Catholic, go as often as you can, not just Sundays. Go more often. It's going to really strengthen you. Then some, perhaps, mental prayer, meditation. Spend 15 minutes doing that.
Number 3.
Read some Bible. No, this is so. Your plan of life is 2. And then, let's say 3. I'm just going to invent
Number
one
4.
of the ones.
I'll give you one more.
No, just say 3 is if you fail, if you fall into sin, if you stop practicing all of this for a while, don't lay down. Don't lay down where you are. Get up again and start over. The athletes start over many times in life, and often with serious injuries, and they're back playing the sport.
That's
or
the way to
practicing.
see it. You never give up.
Never give up. Never give up.
What I like, because I followed former President Donald Trump in some of his business education in the past, and I still follow some of his education where he interlaps with other speakers that I follow, like Robert Kiyosaki and everybody else. He says something very important in business: never give up. Mm-hmm. Other people, other great people, athletes, never give up. Mm. There's there's just something about it.
Yeah.
You know, in failing and getting back up, you've still, and continuing the race, you've actually made progress. The only real failure is if you never get back up or you never start.
Yeah.
Or you never try.
And the prize at the end of the race is too important not to get up again. You've got to get up again, because we've got to get to heaven. There's heaven and there's hell. And hell is real. And we don't want to go there, and we don't know how many people do go there, but we don't want to go there and be separated from God and suffer the pain of fire, which our Lord speaks about in Matthew 25. So let us live this practical life here on earth, keeping the eye on the goal, and we'll all meet each other in heaven, God bless, God willing.
You will be playing golf in heaven, hopefully.
No, we won't. No, we won't be able to play because there's no one to play against, and
Everyone's a winner.
Everyone's a winner. That's right.
A winner.
That's
Everyone
right.
gets a participation certificate.
Yeah, we get a participation certificate. That's right.
So, Father, tell us, where can people get a copy of your book, and do you have any launches or book tours coming up?
Yes.
For our listeners.
Well, this is a public publicity for the book right now, and it's the first main one. Then where can they get a copy? Well, you can always get it, depending on where the reader is, online through Amazon and Booktopia.
Parousia Media, don't forget, those in Australia and the United States of America. Parousia Media has opened a United States of America store. So if you're in the US, you can get your copies of Father's books.
Yeah, and just
and
order online from Parousia. And Connor Court also publishes it in the US and the UK. So Connor Court is the publisher. You can get it directly from them too. You can get it online. Go into your local Catholic bookshop. Catholics are more likely to have it. It could be in a secular bookshop too. It could very well be there.
Yeah,
but
anywhere else.
Go into any bookshop, and if they don't have it, order it in. And that's a good way to alert them to the book. And generally, if a bookseller has somebody come in asking for a title, they're likely to buy a few more copies.
That's actually a good, another practical tool. So if you want to actually have some good material in secular bookshops, maybe order it through the secular bookshop. That's an idea.
Sure,
That's if
absolutely.
they order it.
Absolutely.
But don't forget, support Catholic businesses as well, especially Catholic bookshops. We have to get behind them.
Yeah.
Because bookshops in general,
they're suffering.
Are suffering. So let's talk about some book tours that are coming up and book launches around Sydney. Do you have any confirmed dates?
The next ones in Sydney are both on the 13th of September. So at Parousia itself, Charbel will interview me, and that will go on to the platform EWTN and their own website and whatnot.
Yes.
Yeah. So it will be available online, and then there will be a book launch there in which people will buy the book if they want, and then I'll be able to sign it for them at Parousia. And I think it's at 11 o'clock.
Is that on the 13th? At 11 o'clock?
On Friday. It's Friday the 13th, which is a very a propitious day because some people are a bit aware of Friday the 13th, but I'm not. Anyway, Friday the 13th. And then that same evening, the Catholic Weekly has a book launch in their headquarters, which is now in Leichhardt in Sydney.
Yes.
And we'll be speaking about the book and then signing copies there too.
What day will that be?
The same day, Friday the 13th of September.
Okay, so for those can go at 11 o'clock for a book signing.
I think it's 11, but look on the Parousia website.
Yes, check out Parousia. 11 o'clock, you'll be there to sign books, and people can buy a copy of your book and look at other resources as well.
And the Catholic Weekly is 7 o'clock. Well,
7 p.m.
As the head of the Mustard Seed Bookshop, who will be selling them, said 7 for 7:30. So probably they'll have refreshments at 7, start at 7:30, try to finish by 8:30, and I'll be answering questions as well.
So if anybody wants to meet you live and in person, they can go to the Mustard Seed Bookshop in Leichhardt.
Yes.
On Friday the 13th.
Friday the
September.
13th, 7 in the evening, and then the same at Parousia in the morning,
at
around
o'clock.
11. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with me here on
Pleasure.
the show, Father. It's always great to have you.
Well, we had a good time, George. Thank you.
All right. Don't forget to get your copy of Father's book. So, thank you for tuning into the Catholic Toolbox. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and go to our website at thecatholictoolboxshow.com. That is thecatholictoolboxshow.com, and subscribe to our weekly podcast alert. I'm your host and founder, George Manassa. Until next week, God bless, take care, and take action.
In this era of grave spiritual crisis, it is not enough to simply know about your Catholic faith. That is why we need a Catholic toolbox to equip us with the practical skills necessary to live our Catholic faith to reach our ultimate goal, which is heaven for all eternity. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for the Catholic Toolbox as we hand you the tools to go forth, live the faith, and change our modern world today. Live on the Voice of Charity.